We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. That's quite a statement to start with, isn't it?
It really is. It sets the stage perfectly for what we're digging into today.
Exactly. We're exploring how public opinion actually gets formed, how it's influenced, drawing heavily on insights from Edward Bernays, particularly his work on propaganda.
And this is for anyone listening who wants to, quickly get a handle on these complex forces without getting bogged down.
Right. We want to help you become more aware of the dynamics shaping the world around us. We'll pull out key ideas from Bernays, focusing on maybe the more constructive ways public thought can be guided.
It's about understanding the mechanics. And for folks wanting to dive even deeper into analyzing complex ideas like this, there's a YouTube channel called Mindful Moments.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they use AI for book analysis, and it's really designed to get you thinking critically. Might be a good follow-up resource.
Good tip. So our goal today is really to unpack the mechanisms of influence, using the material we have, including parts of Bernays' propaganda, and maybe shine a light on some, positive potential within it all.
Okay, so let's start with Bernays' core idea, these invisible governors. What did he mean by that?
Well, he pictured this sort of elite group, detached professionals, whose job, as he saw it, was to organize the chaos of society.
How? By shaping what people think, what they like, their ideas.
Exactly. He actually contrasted his view with Walter Lippmann's, which was maybe a bit more downbeat about the public's ability to think clearly. Bernays saw these experts as, essential guides.
And this ties into that whole 19th century positivism vibe, doesn't it? This image of the cool, rational expert steering the somewhat irrational masses. It was a common picture back then.
Yeah, from the 20s through the Cold War, really. This idea of the detached manipulator versus the feverish crowd.
And Bernays and others in the field, they actually leaned into that detachment. It was kind of a selling point to clients, wasn't it?
Definitely. It suggested objectivity, expertise, not just emotional appeals. They could influence things without getting personally tangled up.
But how realistic is that idea of complete detachment? I mean, sure, there's calculation involved, but...
You mean for truly big movements?
Yeah, for genuine mass incitement. Doesn't it usually take some real passionate belief at the core? A sort of fiery commitment, as some have put it?
That's a great point. It suggests the line between, say, calculated strategy and genuine conviction might be, pretty blurry. Orwell's doublethink comes to mind, maybe. Believing and not believing at the same time.
Right, so it's maybe not always this cold manipulator pulling strings from afar.
Then you have the other side, the more, let's say, methodical folks in advertising and PR. Their game is different, isn't it?
It is. It's often more gradual, more incremental. They're building influence bit by bit, not necessarily aiming for, mass upheaval overnight.
But interestingly, even they often end up believing their own message.
Right. Oh, for sure. You see quotes from figures like Marcel Bluestein-Blanchette. He basically said you have to believe in a product to advertise it convincingly.
And Shirley Polikoff with Clairol admitted she genuinely felt the things she wrote in her ads.
Yeah, it shows how persuasion and belief can get really tangled up, even in those commercial fields.
So this leads to what Bernays called the newer salesmanship. What's the key difference there?
It's less about hitting individuals one-on-one and more about understanding and influencing groups. It leverages mass psychology.
Okay, like the example with bacon.
Exactly. Instead of just telling everyone eat bacon, you convince the doctors it's healthy. Why? Because people trust their doctors. The influence flows through that trusted group structure.
That makes sense. And technology really threw fuel on that fire, didn't it?
Massively. The printing press started it, but then newspapers, railroads, the telephone, telegraph, radio, airplanes. Suddenly ideas could spread incredibly fast and wide.
H.G. Wells saw that potential early on, right? That ideas themselves could become more powerful than just charisma or local ties.
Yes, he noted communication tech enabled these sustained, documented collective efforts on a whole new scale.
And society itself is just incredibly organized. Bernays points this out with tons of examples.
Yeah, he lists everything from the Aeronautic Association to the Aztec Club, plus all these conventions happening, photo engravers, writers, Knights of St. John.
Pickle packers, fox breeders, trap shooters. The list goes on.
Right. And his point is that these formal groups, plus all the informal ones, bridge clubs, whatever they all interlace.
And people belong to multiple groups. So one person, like his John Jones example, can spread an opinion across several different networks they're part of.
Understanding that intricate web is crucial to grasping how influence actually works.
So Bernays' book, Propaganda, was essentially trying to lay out these mechanisms, wasn't it? Explain how the public mind is, well, managed.
Yes, how acceptance is built for ideas or products. And he also wrestled with the ethics of it all, this new propaganda.
It's funny how the word propaganda started out neutral.
Right, originally tied to that Catholic congregation spreading the faith, the College of Propaganda in Rome.
And Scientific American apparently even argued to bring back its respectable meaning.
But then the war happened, and, well, the connotation shifted dramatically, became quite negative.
Bernays gives some concrete examples of propaganda in action, looking at newspaper headlines.
Yeah, he picks headlines from the New York Times like 12 nations warn China, or Realty men demand a transit inquiry, and argues these aren't just random events.
He saw them as consciously shaped occurrences designed to influence the public.
Which leads to his definition of modern propaganda: a consistent, enduring effort to create or shape events to influence the relations of the public to an enterprise, idea, or group. It's deliberate, it's ongoing.
And crucially, he argues it's necessary even for good causes. It's not just for selling stuff or, political maneuvering.
Exactly. Charities, public health campaigns, they need public support too. Think about efforts to reduce infant deaths or the Near East Relief Fund drives he mentions. They required organized persuasion.
So propaganda, in his view, could be a tool for progress when used systematically by intelligent minorities whose interests aligned with the public good.
Right. It could help focus and realize desires for reform that were already kind of latent in the population.
And influence doesn't always have to be direct. He uses that Taylor example, right?
Yeah, the London Taylor influences John Smith way over in Topeka, but indirectly.
How does that work again?
Well, the Taylor's idea gets picked up by a big American suit maker who then influences cloth makers, and eventually that style shift reaches the consumer in Topeka through this chain reaction. It shows how influence can ripple outwards.
This brings us to the actual job of the Public Relations Council, as Bernays called it. What did they do?
He broke it down into 4 steps, basically. First, research, understand the client and the public.
Okay.
Second, analyze that research. Third, figure out the right policies for the client based on that analysis.
And fourth.
Then finally, you do the communication, the publicity campaign to implement those policies and shape perception.
And this role really emerged when businesses started realizing they couldn't just ignore public opinion, especially after things like the muckraking era exposed problems.
Precisely. The pragmatic ideal, as Bernays saw it, was to bridge the gap. Make the producer, whether it's a government or a company, understand what the public wants, and vice versa.
So it reduces friction and waste, like the telephone companies explaining their services and addressing concerns.
Exactly that. It's about building mutual understanding.
And underpinning all this is the psychology of it all.
Right. The study of mass psychology, people like Trotter, Laban, Wallace, Lippmann explored this, revealed how you could potentially steer groups by understanding their underlying motives.
An invisible government, basically, run by those who understand these psychological triggers.
Yeah, though Bernays admits it's not an exact science. But it's effective enough, to a degree. Think about why someone buys certain stocks. Often it's based on a whole mix of vague impressions, not deep analysis.
That's the unconscious influence at play.
And this psychological approach is what really separates the new salesmanship from the old.
The old way being
direct appeal. Trying to argue or charm someone into buying, overcoming their resistance head on.
Whereas the new way
is about creating favorable psychological currents, shaping the environment, the circumstances, so that resistance kind of melts away on its own.
Like the piano example. Instead of just selling pianos.
Right. You create the desire for a music room in the home. You get decorators to feature them in exhibits. You get architects to integrate them into plans. You use influencers. You make it a desirable part of the lifestyle.
So you're modifying customs and desires indirectly.
Exactly. It's much more subtle and often more effective.
Bernays mentions other effective campaigns, too, like those competitions.
Yeah, the Jackson Heights apartment decorating contest or the big ivory soap sculpture competitions for kids and artists nationwide.
What made those work so well?
They tapped into existing interests, they involved people directly, and crucially, they often aligned with respected figures or institutions who lent their authority. That endorsement is key.
And speaking of engaging with society, it's worth remembering resources like mindful moments in our own discussions here. They're tools for understanding these complex dynamics and thinking more critically about them.
Absolutely. That critical thinking is vital. Now, this whole shift also reflects a change in how businesses saw their relationship with the public, right?
Definitely. There was a move away from the old attitude of, we run our business, the public be damned, towards recognizing, hey, we actually need public goodwill.
The muckraking period was a real wake-up call for many industries.
So businesses realized they needed to understand the public, its structure, its psychology, even its prejudices.
Plus, advertising was getting more sophisticated, and competition wasn't just firm versus firm anymore, but entire industries vying for the public's favor and dollars.
And Bernays insists that good public relations isn't just like putting a coat of paint on things, is it?
Not at all. He stresses it has to be about genuinely interpreting the business to the public, vividly and truthfully. He talks about continuous interpretation versus just occasional dramatization by high spotting.
It needs to be authentic, or at least perceived as such.
Right. And often, businesses bring in outside experts for this. Why?
Because sometimes an indirect approach works better. The luggage industry example is interesting here.
How so?
Instead of just promoting luggage directly, they might educate related groups, travel agents, fashion writers, decorators, about the importance of good luggage, creating demand indirectly.
Influencing the influencers again. It all ties back. And prominent business leaders eventually echoed this sentiment loud and clear.
Like Samuel Insull and Judge Gary.
Yeah, both essentially said that sympathetic public opinion and goodwill weren't just nice-to-haves. They were absolutely fundamental to business success in the modern era.
But public opinion isn't set in stone, is it? Even if big business seemed to have public favor at one point.
No, it's fluid. Bernays acknowledges concerns, like those raised by Professor Ripley, about corporations potentially undermining public confidence through their actions.
So that goodwill can be lost.
Easily. And that favor translates directly into financial value. Think about the Victor Talking Machine Company stock offering Bernays mentions.
Its success depended entirely on public acceptance.
Largely, yes. Selling stocks and bonds relies heavily on the public believing in the company and its prospects. Genuine public acceptance creates real economic value.
And now, with business becoming more international, that need for acceptance crosses borders too.
Absolutely. The game gets even more complex. And of course, the methods of influence are always evolving, and arguably, the public is becoming more savvy too.
Which brings us neatly to the end. It's clear these forces shaping opinion are powerful and constantly shifting.
A lot to think about.
Definitely. So as we wrap up, we really hope you'll engage further. First off, please subscribe so you don't miss our future explorations.
And if you found this valuable, share it with friends or colleagues who might also be curious about how the world ticks.
Your support also means a lot. If you're inclined, consider making a purchase via the link you'll find in the show notes. It genuinely helps us keep these conversations going.
But most importantly, perhaps, is the takeaway. Think critically. Question the information, the narratives, the campaigns you encounter every single day.
Right. And maybe a final thought to leave you with, now that we understand a bit more about the power involved in shaping public thought. What are the ethical responsibilities that come with that knowledge, both for those wielding influence and for us as citizens navigating it?
That's the big question, isn't it?